Hello, this is the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and today it is our honor and pleasure to welcome Minerva Torres-Shelton, who is the Republican candidate for El Paso County Sheriff. And may I call you Minerva?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Please call me Max.
I'm
It's a
Max.
pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. So today we're going to talk about Minerva's professional background. We'll talk a little bit about her opponent as well as her policy positions. So let's get started.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you from?
So I was born in Oxnard, California, because my parents were migrant workers. And then right after I was born, they returned to Mexico, was raised there for 8 years, and then we came back to the United States. So where am I originally? California, but lived in Mexico.
How long have you been in El Paso?
Combined, I think it's close to 16 years.
Okay, for quite a long time then.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your professional career, which began in the El Paso Police Department.
Correct. When
did you enter the department, and what was your position there?
So I entered the department in 1991. I entered the department in 1997. My bad. 1997. I was there for 5 years. I was a patrol officer working the streets of downtown El Paso.
Your beat was actually downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And your headquarters was the downtown office, though?
Mm-hmm. 200 South Campbell. I specifically selected downtown because I had left the military. I wanted a law enforcement career, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could make it as a patrol officer. So I specifically selected the toughest area, which was back then.
Downtown. It probably still is the toughest area. Mm-hmm. So let's back up a moment. You just said military. We always love military experience. Tell us about your military experience.
So I did 6 years of active and inactive duty. I was a military intelligence sergeant. During my inactive duty is when I joined El Paso PD. So finished my inactive time while I was in El Paso PD. And after the attacks on 9/11, I went right into the FBI.
Wow, interesting. Thank you for your service, by the way. Mm-hmm. So 6 years of active and inactive military duty as an intelligence officer, and then 5 years as a patrolwoman in downtown El Paso for the EPPD.
Mm-hmm. And it was a military intelligence sergeant. I'm sorry if I said officer, but it was sergeant.
Military intelligence sergeant. Thank you very much. Okay, and so moving forward from the EPPD, you went to the FBI. Mm-hmm. And tell us about your career there.
So my first assignment was Sacramento, California. Right when I arrived, I saw a problem that was occurring, that it was not being addressed by the Sheriff's Department. It was not being addressed by the PD. So I put a plan together. I created a task force, got people to join in from different agencies, and created and led a task force right from the beginning as a brand new agent for the FBI. And it was human trafficking. It was a human trafficking task force, but we were doing a lot of undercover work. The reason why the PD was not addressing this problem is because the problem was hidden from the community. So a lot of young girls were being trafficked, but usually this happened in hotel rooms. So I came up with an idea was to send an undercover officer into the room to actually do the date and try to get the individual that was trafficking the girl. It was one of the most dangerous things that you can do in the PD, and I believe it still is. Sending an undercover person into an unknown is very dangerous, but we prepared and we got it. We were successful. It was for maybe 7 years. I received several awards because of that work. It gave me the opportunity later to testify in front of certain representatives in Capitol Hill because of my human trafficking expertise. So it was really, and I would keep you here all day if we talked about the cases, but basically what it was I saw a need that wasn't being addressed. So I took action and created this task force.
Okay, that was in Sacramento?
Mm-hmm. That was in Sacramento.
7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to convictions.
Oh, there's still people in jail right now. When you traffic a girl that is under the age of 14, and if it's a federal charge, you'll get an extensive sentence. And as a result of that work too, because we got so good at it, at first it was kind of a little hard because we were learning as a team. But once we all knew what we were looking for, it was nonstop. We were finding girls all the time, young girls. It got to the point where we kind of didn't look on the internet anymore because we were so good at knowing what the wording was, that we knew that if we made a date with a girl, it was going to be a young girl. And so, because again, people know that when the feds come in and you're going to be charged with a federal crime, people talk. So we were actually responsible for resolving 2 unsolved murders. One was a young female college student. It was she had been shot in the head while going to a club. It would remain unresolved, and because a result of our work, so it's like my foundation that it gave me for my entire career in the FBI.
How long was your career in the FBI?
It was 21 years.
Okay, so you entered in
Sacramento, California.
what year?
Right after 9/11. So 9/11 was in 01. I joined the FBI in January of 2002, and 21 years after that. So
okay, all the way through
last year.
Just a few months ago.
Well, not a few months ago. So I retired April of last year. Because I knew I was going to jump into this race, and there's no politics involved in the FBI.
Right. So let's go through your career. You're 7 years in Sacramento. You establish the task force. You go after human trafficking of girls, and then what?
Mm-hmm. So there was more work that I did before the task force. I did violent crime. I was assigned to a violent crime. Working gangs, drugs, and then the human trafficking. And so it led to 10 years, a total of 10 years. Then I took a transfer to Seattle. So I was in Seattle. It was an RA, a satellite office out of Seattle, and I was there 4 years before I took a promotion to headquarters and went to DC. I was in DC for about 2 years, and then I came back home to El Paso.
How long were you in El Paso as an FBI agent?
I'm going to say, well, not as an agent. I came back as a supervisor. So I was 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what was your role in your final years of your FBI career in El Paso? What were you doing as a supervisor?
So when I arrived, I was a supervisor for the crimes against children. I quickly left and got assigned to lead the gang squad, which is at the Texas Anti-Gang Center. Then after that, I was reassigned to go to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. A lot of the time that I was there in El Paso Division, also whenever they needed somebody to fill in for one of the bosses, because the way it works for the FBI, you have an SAC, you have 3 ASACs, and then you got the group supervisors. So ASACs were 3 here in El Paso. Whenever there was a need because somebody was going to be gone, I was one of the ones that was pulled to fill in. Some of my time there, when I was at the Texas Anti-Gang Center, I was basically pulled to be the acting ASAC. Why? Because I had already had had done all my inspections and requirements that needed to be done in order to promote. I had the experience, so I could have easily promoted to being an ASAC, but it would have required me to move. And I did not want to move. I wanted to serve my community here in El Paso. And so I had already made the decision that I was no longer. As a supervisor, I had the honor of doing great things in the Bureau that made me who I am. Today, I was assigned to DC for 2 years, was put in charge because of my experience with a human trafficking task force and how I had led a task force at such, because I had just arrived at being a young agent. My supervisor selected me to lead an operation that involved the 56 field offices throughout the U.S. and over 80 task forces in 5 countries. I actually traveled to London to train some of the personnel up there. It was all part of that operation, which it entailed over 2 years to prepare, but it was a success. And why do I say it was a success? Because you're responsible for the logistics, you're responsible for the budget, because you're dealing with millions of dollars when you're putting an operation that huge, making sure that the policies are being followed, because you got to check off on all these undercover operations that are going to happen. You got to coordinate with everybody, you know, the media reporting to the higher ups in DC. So it was, again, it was a lot of work. My days were long, but I learned a lot.
Wow, sounds impressive. So here in El Paso, as an FBI supervisor, I imagine you had to coordinate with local law enforcement, with EPPD and the county sheriff's office, as well as Homeland Security, correct?
The sheriff's office, believe it, they only had one body assigned to the FBI office. That person, if you needed help, could probably be helped. But again, people don't understand, and I talk about this as I'm campaigning, cases don't belong to an agency, and we need to move away from that. Why? Because when 9/11 happened, it was a result of the lack of intel sharing. And so I keep saying that when I become the next sheriff, if elected and I become the next sheriff, all the federal agencies are going to have a friend there. Why? Because I use this example too. If I make an arrest of 2 young kids, 17, 16-year-old, who are moving 5 pounds of dope, is that a good arrest? It's a good arrest, but you're not solving the problem if you're not sharing intel. Why? Because if I don't share the intel with a federal agency saying, hey, we had this arrest, here's the report, they might already have an investigation looking into Juan Doe, who's in El Paso, in Mexico or Colombia or whatever. And this information is crucial for them to put it together or gather more intel. So that's what I mean, that we need to share more intel information.
So you're saying that there's a disconnect currently between federal agencies and local law enforcement. You think there's a disconnect?
Let me put it this
way.
way.
You can say that because you worked as a federal supervisor here.
It needs to be stronger. People need to move away from thinking this case belongs to me. And a lot of it, people think that because, for example, the Texas Anti-Gang Center, you're putting a case together, and for those that don't know, the Texas Anti-Gang Center, you have representatives from the DEA, El Paso PD, sheriffs wasn't there when I was there. So just different, HSI, everybody's there. Well, then you invite your partners to work. Hey, we have this case, because that's the purpose. That's why the Texas Anti-Gang Center was created. But then if I'm, as an agent, sharing information with you, and then you all of a sudden take off with that intel and start putting your case together over there and leaving me out of it, I'd be like, well, wait a minute. I share that information with you. You should keep me part of this investigation. And so that's why I think people kind of hold the information back, because of the bad experiences they've had.
Right.
So I totally get it also. But again, we need to share information, and I will certainly do that as your next sheriff.
Okay, so let's move forward to, I do want to get to your opponent, but first I want to address what your critics are going to say about you. Mm-hmm. The first thing the critics are going to say about you is that you're a Republican running for office. So let's start with that. Mm-hmm. Why are you a Republican? Mm-hmm. And how are you going to overcome that deficit? Because you're in a county that's overwhelmingly Democratic.
So help me, because I have a lot of things in my head, and if I forget, bring me back and ask me the question again. So you have to really look at the numbers. You have to be a nerd and know how the numbers, and that's not me. This campaign is doing good because I've been surrounded by good people who have helped me, but we've been trending red the past few years, if you look at the numbers.
But what is it about the Republican philosophy that attracts you to that party, just so I understand?
Okay, so growing up, my parents were business owners, And I was going through college. My father would ask for help, saying, "Can you help me separate the money? So we got to pay the taxes." And that's when I started realizing, because I'm very visual. I was like, all this money is going to the government. It's like, yep, all that money goes to the government. So the smaller the government, the better for families, because you get to keep more of your money. And that's when I realized the Republican Party is better for the Hispanic community. Why? Because we, the Hispanic community, are business owners. So the more money that they keep is better for their families. I believe in a strong defense. We need to protect our country. I came, again, born in Oxnard, but lived in Mexico till I was 8 years old. And enough to realize what Mexico is like, and also because I follow politics, we have to protect the rule of law. We have to protect our country, because not everybody, being in the FBI, not everybody's good. So the borders are open. We're getting individuals from all over the country, from all over the world, everywhere. But not everybody's a good actor. So we need to protect. So I believe in strong borders. But really what makes me a Republican is the fact that I believe in a small government, because that is the best for families.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. So what about the fact that you've never worked for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office? Your critics are going to say, well, your opponent has spent years in the county sheriff's office. You have spent none. Although you have a long and distinguished record of law enforcement, both locally in the EPPD and federally with the FBI.
But my opponent
you're planning to run an organization that you have not worked in. How would you respond to that?
Well, one, my opponent is not part of the sheriff's office. My opponent is a constable. So let's get into what he is, because he glosses over the fact that he has a 21-year law enforcement career. Let's talk about what that law enforcement is. He did only 2 years in a small police department, which was, I believe, Socorro, could be Socorro or Anthony, small police department, 2 years. And then from there, he went and became a bailiff. So I'm sure, I don't know if your audience knows or you know what a bailiff does. They make sure the security inside of a courtroom is safe. So they basically sit in a courtroom, making sure that, they work for the judge, making sure that everything's safe. He won't tell you how many years he became a bailiff. I'm still trying to figure that out. And then the rest was a constable. What does the constable do? They serve civil process. That's it. They don't do criminal investigations. They don't put cases together. They just get paperwork where the judge says, go deliver this, or this person needs to be evicted, go serve them. And if the people don't move, let's evict them. Let's get them out of there.
You make an interesting point. We're going to talk about Ugarte, but you're claiming he only had a couple of years of actual law enforcement experience in a small department, and then became a bailiff, sat in a courtroom, and then became a constable, essentially behind a desk and then serving warrants when he's not working for Walmart on the side. Correct?
Correct.
Did I say that correctly?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And people are misled. And I've been talking about this when I meet with people. Don't let that uniform and all those stars confuse you. He serves civil process. And I know, because I used to know. I mean, he would help out whenever I needed. Whenever we were going to execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant, you got to make sure that everybody's going to be safe. And when I say that, when you go knock on somebody's door, if I'm executing a search warrant, your house is 6 a.m, you're waking up, you're going to be confused, you're going to look out your window, you're going to say, what is happening? I got to make sure that you know that it's law enforcement. Well, FBI is we have regular cars with lights, but they don't look like law enforcement. So I would call Oscar whenever he could help, because I needed his vehicle and his lights that had the placard. But I knew that he couldn't do anything else because they don't do criminal work.
Okay. So we've addressed some important points here. What about budgets? The El Paso County Sheriff's Office has an 8-figure budget. It's a very large unit within the county. Probably the most important thing that the county does, aside from the judicial branch, is running the county sheriff's office, which helps EPPD with law enforcement in the city limits and handles all law enforcement outside the city limits within the county. Socorro, Horizon City, Anthony, and so on. So it's a large financial unit. Do you have the experience to run a large budget?
Absolutely. From the very beginning, before I announced, I filed a Freedom of Information Act because I wanted to know where our money is. Because if you go to their website, their last annual report is from 2016. That's a long time without answers. So what happened after I filed the Freedom of Information Act? I got a letter saying your request is gonna cost too much money. It's okay. I'm not. We're already overtaxed. I'm not gonna add more burden to the people. So I said, okay, look, this is what I want. I want all the reports. You used to put them on your website. They're no longer there. So I want all the reports from 2016 to now.
I'm sorry, what kind of reports?
So an annual report, and thank you for helping me. I need to explain that. An annual report tells you how your hard-earned money is being utilized in the sheriff's office and what kind of crime we're seeing. So since 2016, there's been nothing has been produced.
And that's irregular.
Yes.
Okay.
They would put it up there. If you go to their website, you'll see all these annual reports and it stops at 2016. So then I got it and I'm like, oh my God, this is so confusing. Like, nobody knows. Nobody knows how your money is being used. And that's one of the things that I want to change. I'm very visual. You're going to see a pie on my website where you're going to see 20% is going to this, 10% is going to this. It shouldn't be a secret because it's your money.
Okay. Let's now focus on your opponent, Oscar Ugarte. Point by point. We're looking at him and asking ourselves how it is that he was allowed to run in the first place. Let's begin there. He is a constable, an employee of El Paso County. And the law says that he had to resign his office in order to run for sheriff. And my understanding is that the county commissioner's court gave him some kind of special privilege, actually permitted him to remain a constable while he was running for sheriff. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I've been talking about it when I meet with people. I've done a video, two videos, I believe, where I talk about it.
Why was an exception made for him?
Well, can they make an exception?
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, why was he not forced to resign?
But here's the biggest message. It's the law. The law is very clear. It says if he had more than 13 months left on his term, he needed to resign. And it's been more than 13 months. You can go back, look at the article when he announced. So why is he still campaigning on our dime? So if he can't even follow the law, how can he apply it? And this is where my passion is, because again, you want this person to be the next sheriff, to apply the law to us, but yet he can't follow it. And so I encourage all your listeners, we cannot take this, and it's not because I'm running, it's because it's about the rule of law, the good old boy system. My passion, when I was in the FBI, I had about 5 people, all who didn't know each other, approach me and say, you should consider running for sheriff. I still wasn't sure. The defining moment came when I saw that newspaper article where several politicians were saying, we want Oscar to be the next sheriff and we're going to endorse him. He hadn't even announced yet. And then I thought, what? So we didn't talk about what happened to my father when he was convicted as an innocent man. That same what stirred my heart is what stirred me to jump in this race. And I said, no, this position belongs to the people. It will be a sad day for us if he is the next sheriff. Why? Because he can't even follow the law himself. and he's going to be applying the law to us, to our community. No, I've been working so hard, and not just me, but a group of us have been working so hard to prevent that from happening.
Okay, let's talk about Veronica Escobar, who is our congresswoman representing Congressional District 16. She has been very involved in local politics for a member of Congress. I mean, there she is wearing an Ugarte t-shirt, out there campaigning very, very hard for this guy. And this is a very progressive member of Congress. She's way to the left. She's out there telling everybody how mean Israel is for killing terrorists, for example. And I can go on and on and on. Some will say, oh, she's bringing so much money back to our community. Maybe so, but politically, from our standpoint, she's, somewhere to the left of Fidel Castro. I don't mind saying that. And there she is promoting this candidate who has stated publicly to the media that civil servants, that therapists should be the ones who respond to domestic disputes. Now, we interviewed Bobby Flores, who responded to a domestic dispute and was shot at. He came within an inch of being killed on that day. Responding to domestic disputes, you can't get political about that. You can't apply a progressive philosophy to responding to a domestic dispute where there could be a perpetrator with a gun, where somebody might be threatened with death or worse. So where are you on that? Should we apply a progressive philosophy to law enforcement? Should we be nice to perpetrators in domestic disputes and send in a therapist instead of an armed peace officer? Where do you stand?
So the thing I think, and if it is my opponent who came up with the idea, that shows his lack of experience that I've been talking about that he doesn't have. Why? Because I have overseen numerous operations. Even when we executed search warrants, executed an arrest warrants, you have to, as a supervisor, you have to review that operation order. Why? Because you're responsible for the safety of the person that you're arresting. You're responsible for the safety of the people that live in that home, whether you have a wife, children, you're responsible for them, and you're responsible for the people surrounding that home. So you have to dot your I's, cross your T's before you do any of this. And that area where you execute that warrant is basically, you can't allow anybody who hasn't been trained to get near that area. Why? Because if I allow somebody who's not law enforcement to get in before it's secure, before we cleared it and, said it was safe, somebody can get hurt. And if you get hurt, then now you're responsible. So going back to my opponent's idea about bringing people into a scene, that's dangerous. And God forbid one of them get hurt. Now the county is responsible. So now we're going to be involved in lawsuits. And who's going to pay? We are. Same thing with the deaths happening in the jail. 50 over the last 10 years in the downtown jail, where there's been suicides, accidental deaths, and the natural deaths. 50 in the last 10 years. Every time that you have a suicide, that you have an accidental death, the family is suing because their loved one died in custody. And when they're suing, we pay that money.
You make an important point, and let's be clear. For fiscal year 2025, El Paso County has a budget of $602 million compared to the city's $1.3 billion. But in the case of the county, well over half of that budget is encumbered by the state of Texas. It's earmarked for specific tasks, and the county really has very little margin to work with. And so, in theory, they're supposed to run a very tight ship. But we have a county commissioner's court right now that is spending our county into a very deep ditch. We're talking about $894.4 million worth of bonds between the county and UMC that have been approved by this commissioner's court. And they're at a point where they can't bond another dollar for many years because they're reaching their absolute limit in terms of debt issues. So the county sheriff's office is going to have to really remain within its lane. It's not going to be able to grow and expand much, if at all, and you cannot afford lawsuits. You just can't.
You can't. But here's the other thing. County Commissioner's Court, okay, because of politics, plain politics. Back when immigration started, I was the first one out of any of the other candidates, even Bobby, none of them. This is no longer a federal issue. What do I mean about that? Because we're all paying for it. Because they're coming here, they're either going to the hospital, they're being detained in our facilities, detention facilities. So let's talk about that. Because the County Commissioner's Court did not have those conversations with state representatives, we lost that on funding. So when we could have had federal and state funding to detain them and hold them in our jails, we are now paying that money. And it's not fair to the rest of us. So I've been saying from the beginning, and as your next sheriff, those are one of the first conversations I will have. Federal government, state representatives, they need to pay their fair share for holding them in our detention facility.
Right, okay. So coming back to Ugarte, he did not resign to run per the law. He's promoting progressive policies that could potentially get the county in lawsuits and put the lives of police officers at risk, as well as defenseless individuals stuck in domestic violence situations. This is a guy who spent the balance of his career really behind a desk or not doing much, right? I mean, apparently he's got plenty of time to work part-time as a security officer for the private sector, is what I'm learning here. So he's got time on his hands. And I have never seen such a campaign. We're talking about yellow signs and mailers that are carpet bombing our community. Oscar Ugarte for sheriff. Oscar Ugarte for sheriff. I don't know. I go to his webpage and I'm looking at that and I don't see much substance there. I mean, what is it that he stands for? What does this man want to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, he's just, again, I think it's because we need to educate the Hispanic community. And when I say Hispanic, obviously a lot of us here are Hispanic, but you're talking about the older generation. I go to the senior centers now that I've been talking and campaigning. And I am very, again, same things that I'm telling you here now. Don't let that uniform trick you, because he needs to tell you exactly what he's done those 20 years, not just law enforcement, because he's counting his bailiff time as law enforcement.
Is he campaigning in his uniform?
He is. Mm-hmm.
He is campaigning in his uniform.
Yes,
Can you be more specific? Are we talking billboards, what?
So he shows up. He shows up to talk to the senior centers in his uniform, because he wants to, people see a uniform and see the stars. Is that
permitted under Texas election law?
So I don't think it is, because it projects that he is, some people think, okay, he's already a deputy, he works for the sheriff's office, and so you're not supposed to do that. He's supposed to show up in regular clothing and do these presentations, but he's not. I've been to other events, and this is before the primaries, where he would show up in uniform, and I saw him. So again, we cannot, and I encourage your listeners, please, the day of which we're right around the corner, text your friends, remind them, because people get busy. My husband's great about doing that. He sends out about 10 messages to his close friends and don't forget, we got to vote, whether it's propositions or something. And you'd be amazed. People will send them like pictures of the I voted. So it's just a friendly reminder to vote, to get everybody to go out to vote. We cannot allow him to be the next sheriff.
And the bottom line is, what do El Pasoans want from their county sheriff's office and from their sheriff? Number one, they want to be safe. They don't want politics. They don't want some kind of progressive agenda. They don't want to feel good about treating perpetrators with leniency. They want to be safe. They want the bad guys in prison, right? And they want to walk the streets without worrying about what's going to happen to them. I mean, it's simple, right? Mm-hmm. And you're that person.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk briefly, concisely about your policy priorities. Let's list them. What's your top priority should you be elected? Number one.
Yes. So I'm going to look at the budget. I'm going to see where it's going. That's a lot of money. and we have no answers where it's going.
Full budget review, number one.
Full budget review, and I want to see where our deputies are being assigned. I want to know exactly where they're located, what they're doing, because maybe we need to reassign. The number one issue here, because I've been block walking, and I'm block walking even before the primaries, asking voters, what are your needs from the sheriff's office? Like, what is it that you need?
And what are they telling you?
DWIs, reckless driving, the speeders on. That is the number one main concern out of the survey that we did.
Dangerous drivers.
Drunk drivers.
And reckless. Okay,
Yes.
so number one, budget review. Number two, to more efficiently allocate resources.
Yes.
Anything else?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to create a team to address, because that is the concern. I'm listening to voters. They want a team to have more visibility. So I'm going to bring transparency, visibility to the sheriff's office. I plan to meet with the community. I have been saying from the very beginning, I will meet at least with you 3 times a year. And I'm going to tell you how your hard-earned money is being utilized and what kind of crime we're seeing. We are going to build an office of community policing, that we serve the community. And why? Why do I say that? Because this is one thing that the Bureau, the FBI is great about. We built relationships in the community. And when you build those relationships in the community, people feel more like they can pick up the phone and call you and say, you know what, I'm seeing this, or hey, I just saw this. And in order to create investigations, because when I get, as an agent, you get put in communities and you don't know anything about, you don't know who the sheriff is, you don't know who the PD is. So guess what? You're right there. You better create those relationships. Why?
Right. Yes, and look, the sheriff is expected to enforce federal law, state law, local law, right? You're supposed to enforce all levels of the law, but you do have some discretion as sheriff. What is your philosophy toward law enforcement? If you get directives from the federal and state governments, do you plan to enforce the law, or are you going to use your discretion to choose what areas of the law you're not going to enforce? What is your thinking there?
So I think I think I've been campaigning a long time already to some of your viewers who do follow me, the community that does follow me. I'm the first one who has said from the beginning that I would never ignore a law. Like SB4, you had other candidates who would say here, oh, no. Well, it's the law. You can't just, like my opponent. What does he think he can't follow the law? Like he just ignore it. So again, as your next sheriff, I will never write legislation. I will never implement legislation or introduce legislation. I am going to enforce the laws.
Okay, so SB4, for example, which is immigration law, for a lot of people in the community is very controversial. For many in the community who are undocumented, it's scary. So your role, in your words, is not to interpret. Your role is to enforce the law because that's the law, period.
Well, it is very controversial, but here's the thing. So SB4, I would never use it to target somebody, to pull somebody over, because I'd be the first one to get pulled over because I'm Hispanic. You know, if they think they're going to profile, I'd be the first one that'd be profiled. Let's pull her over. So I would never do that. But if you call me that somebody's breaking into your house or it's breaking into your car, deputies respond, and we find out that the person is not here in this country, should we enforce SB4? Meaning that should we send the person back to wherever he came from because he's not here legally? Well, that's the other question that I asked when I was doing my survey. What do you think about SB4? Never going to use it to profile or to pull somebody over just for that reason. But if it's in the commission of a crime, are you okay if we enforce it? And they said, absolutely. Because we don't want anybody here in our country who is not doing good. That's the responses I was getting from the community. So again, I did my own survey. We asked people. And so that's what they were saying.
Okay. Let me ask you one more question. Are there any leaders in county or city government, leaders elected or not, whom you admire?
Here or
In El Paso.
In
city,
El Paso.
City or county government, are there any leaders whom you admire, who you think are doing a particularly good job? Or are you generally critical of our city and county leadership?
So I love, even before I was a candidate, I loved politics on a national level, on a local level. I always do my homework. Now that I've been campaigning, and even before I started campaigning, we have a good old boy system in place here. What do I mean by the good old boy system? Meaning that if you're part of that inner circle, you're going to help each other. Hey, now you become the mayor. So now that you're leaving the mayor position, I'm going to jump in there. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. The government belongs to the people. And I love outsiders. But not just an outsider, somebody who's informed and knows. If I see that there's an outsider out there who knows about finances, who's done well, I'm gonna probably select him. Why? Because we need more more people like that in our local government, because we are overtaxed. I served in the appraisal review board right after I retired. I jumped right in there to learn, like, what's going on. Why are houses, why are property taxes so expensive? And so again, I'm very visual. I went there. I got the opportunity to see the people that were coming in, and that's a whole different. We can talk about it that differently. But again, to answer your question, when I see certain things, I get disappointed.
So the answer is no. There's nobody in local government you admire in particular.
I wouldn't say that I admire anybody, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Just curious. Just a curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So you see yourself really as an outsider coming in, unbiased and impartial to reform.
For the people.
Got it.
For the people.
Okay.
And that's what I'm campaigning. That's why, I'm talking to both sides. I'm talking to Republicans and Democrats. Why? Because when I was in law enforcement for 26 years, I never went to your house and asked you, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Why? Because I didn't care. I was there to serve and protect. And as your next sheriff, that's what I will do. I will serve and protect. I am bold. I am not shy. I have courage. Why? Because somebody needs to speak up of what's happening in our community. When you have people out there who can't even afford to pay their own homes, and again, that has nothing to do with the sheriff's office, but we need to educate our community, and I'm passionate about that. We need to change the way things have worked here in El Paso, because when the politicians handpicked my opponent, I thought, wait a minute, at what point did we think? That's why I don't take endorsements, because at what point did we forget that we elected them? I don't need an endorsement. I need the endorsement of the people. That's what's important to me, not taking it from some politician. So my dad used to have a saying that he would use all the time, and now as I'm older, I find myself using it. Yo no tengo cola que me pisen. If you translate it, says, I don't have a tail that anybody can step on. And that is refreshing. Why? Because then I can call it the way it is, and will only do what's good for the community, and that includes the employees of the sheriff's office. Morale is bad. Things need to change there. It's, people can't wait till they retire, and that is sad. That is sad. As their next leader, I will invest in the employees. I will make sure that they have the necessary training. And no, I am not going to be looking for money. I am going to, since I've been in the federal government, I know that there's a lot of free training out there, and I am going to take advantage of that. Okay.
Well, this has been a really educational interview. We learned a lot. We learned all about your policy objectives, your philosophy, and about your opponent. And we appreciate it very much. Thank you so much, Minerva.
Yes, thank you so much.
And thank you especially for your service.
Thank you.
And we wish you every success.
Thank you.
Thank you.